Okay.
Might as well.
All right, my name is Courtney Dickerson, and I'm here with my grandmother, Nadyne Dickerson, to talk about her life and her experiences. Today is October 13th, 2014, and let me just start off if you can just state your full name.
Nadyne Joan Dickerson.
All right, and when were you born?
May 24th, 1934.
In your hometown.
East Grand Forks, Minnesota.
Okay, so how long did you live there?
I lived there for 18 years.
Mm-hmm. And then where did you move to after that?
From there, I moved to Willis, Virginia.
Okay, and why did you move from your hometown?
I got married.
All right.
And my husband was from there.
Oh, very nice. All right, so we're just going to start talking about your mother. You can just tell me a little about her.
My mother was a very great person.
Okay.
She was also a businesswoman and a great mother and wife.
All right, and what was her name?
Minnie Caroline Witt.
All right, and when was she born?
18,
18.
19.
1890.
Can you cut that out?
Oh, we can edit it.
Oh,
You're fine. All right, so how old was she when she died?
she was 89.
All right. And do you remember her hometown?
Rugby, North Dakota.
Okay. And did she attend school?
Yes, I think maybe as much as 7th, 8th grade, maybe equivalent to that.
Okay, and do you know offhand why she went that far?
I would imagine they did, and then that was at the time that they went out and started to work. Other younger children coming along.
Okay, and then what did she, oh, sorry.
Younger brothers and sisters.
All right. And what did she do for a living?
She was a seamstress.
All right.
She started out while she was making hats.
Mm-hmm.
She ran a hat shop. Then from there she went into the furrier business and made and altered fur coats.
Okay. And then do you remember, like, did she stay with one company or did she move around?
As if my memory, she was with this one company at home. Then they opened up a separate store, and Mother was the manager there. And then she did all the repairing of the furs, and as I said, actually making fur coats.
Okay. And was she always a seamstress?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then do you remember how old she was when she got married?
22.
Right.
18, 20, 22.
All right. So were you guys close?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
All right. How would you characterize her?
A very sweet, understanding, firm, but fair, and special person.
Okay. And then what kind of things was she strict about?
Well, we knew what our chores were and what we could do and what we couldn't. And it wasn't hard to follow because they weren't that complicated. It was just your normal, you have chores around the house and you do it, and after that your time was yours.
Okay. And then what was your fondest memory of her?
I guess she was fun. Even after she got older, she was always willing to try new things. And whatever we were into, she was into. So she was a real friend besides being a mother.
Okay. And when you think of her, is there a specific memory or like story that comes to mind?
Well, there was a lot of them, but I can remember one of my nephews got a go-kart. Now, my mother then was up in her 60s. She had never sat behind a steering wheel. She got in that go-kart and went across the field, and we're all screaming and hollering, and she's just having the time of her life. And we just, all of us are standing there saying, how many mothers would do this? So she was an extraordinary person.
All right. Now let's talk about your father. Tell me a little bit about him.
Daddy was he was tall, very nice looking, more reserved, and kind of the patriarch. But he still had a good sense of humor, loved to do things with the boys more so than us girls, but as a child growing up, I would meet him at the corner every night coming home from work, and he'd always dig in his pocket, and there was always a candy bar there for me, so that was special.
Okay, and what was his name?
Carlton Alonzo Johnston.
All right, and when was he born?
1881.
1881.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. All right, and then when did he pass? How old was he?
He was 91.
Okay. And then what did he do for a living?
He was primarily a carpenter,
Okay.
and he spent quite a few years, later years, especially during the war, in Detroit, Michigan,
Okay.
working there at the factories.
So he lived away from home for a little bit?
Yes, he was gone quite a bit in the winter time, because there wasn't work around there in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And he went up there then to work, and he worked in the factories. But I said this was during the war. So.
Okay. Now, do you remember if like the factories provided him housing or?
No, he rented a room
Okay.
and stayed there.
And how, like, do you remember how your life at home, if that was changed while he was gone?
Well, yes. We went to mother for everything. You know, mother was there, and mother was doing this, and mother was doing that. So when Daddy came home, it was a little bit of adjustment, because mother had taken over the mother and the father part of the family. For my brother and I, we were the youngest.
Okay. So was there ever a time when he was not working as a carpenter?
After he left Detroit, came home, then he had a little business of his own, and his health took him where he could not work anymore.
All right. And were you close with your father?
Yes, I was close. Not as close as my mother, but as I said, during our growing up years, he was gone a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that made a difference.
All right. And then how would you characterize him?
He was a very, like I said, knowledgeable person, interested in anything that was going on in the world. He did like to argue with you, and he had a strong opinion about things. But on a whole, he was a very nice person.
That's great. What things was he strict about, though?
Well, raising 13 children, he had a lot of ideas. One of them was no boy comes to the house and sit outside and blow the horn in the car. He came in, he walked at the door, and he had to be introduced. And if you had chores to do, those chores had to be done.
Okay. And what was like the fondest memory you had besides the candy?
I think the fondest was watching him have a good time. He when he would, and he would get out and he would even dance with everybody and everything. And I didn't see my father do that a lot.
So like when he wanted to, he was the life of the party.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. Great. And let's talk a little bit about your parents' marriage. So how did they meet?
I think they met through friends. They were both in a small town in North Dakota, and they met through friends.
All right. And how long were they married?
They were married 41 years.
Okay. And what do you think was the best thing about their marriage?
That they could raise as many children as they did and still love each other and provide a home for all of us.
Okay. And then, did your parents bring you up to consider certain things important in life?
Oh, yes. Yes. We were brought up school, church, honesty, and you definitely did not tell lies. That got you in more trouble than anything.
All right. And how many kids did they have?
At 13.
And then, like, from the range of, like, the years.
I was the youngest, and when I was born, the oldest was 21 years old.
Okay, so you were born in?
1934.
So 1913, I'm guessing, would be the
Mhm.
oldest? Wow.
And one sister and one brother had
Mhm.
already married and had each a son. So I was born an aunt twice, twice over.
All right, and do you recall how many grandkids they had?
There were 22 grandchildren, I think.
Okay.
It was 22.
I'm guessing you can't list them all quite yet.
It took me a little while.
All right, and so just tell me a little bit about your siblings.
Well, I had, let's see, there were 6 brothers,
Mhm.
and I had 4 sisters. I was the youngest. The next to me was a brother. And so him and I kind of grew up together, even though he was 5 years older than I was. But we grew up together, and after the war started, him and I were the only 2 children at home. So we were together quite a bit.
All right, and could you possibly name and order the children?
There was Naoma, Carlton, DeWitt, Clarence, who passed away when he was about 11 years old, Florence, Jay, Eugene, Joyce, Blanche, Jimmy, Stanley, Phyllis, and she passed away when she was a baby, and then me.
Okay, and then you recalled earlier that there was a few problems with names and birth certificates.
Oh yes, that very much so. My one sister, mother called her Joyce Margaret, and we did for years until we found out her name on the birth certificate was Ines Irene. My dad liked that, my mother liked the other. My one brother, when they finally found his birth certificate, it just said Baby Boy Johnston. And the other birth certificate just read J period C period for JC, because he went as JC. And there was no name, just the 2 initials.
Now, did your parents ever think of JC standing for something, or did they literally
Well, it was just JC all the time until after he got in service. It kind of confused everybody. So he changed his name to JAY and then C period. So it was still JC, but we knew him as J period, C period. And then you'd ask him, how do you spell your name? He'd say JC, which did cause confusion.
All right, and then you said you were the baby of the family.
Yes.
Do you think that altered your relationship with your parents?
Oh no. Oh no. I guess I'm still the spoiled one.
Yeah, I guess you appreciate that one.
Yeah.
All right. So did when you were a kid, did all of your siblings live with you at once?
No, like I spoke, one sister and one brother was already married and had a family, and the rest of them were. That one brother was in the CC camp at that time. That was a camp you went to, and they were in and out. And then of course the war came, and then everybody was gone except my younger brother and I.
Okay. So did you and your siblings get along very well?
Oh yes, oh yes, I did, because I was the baby, and I got in. Sounds very self-centered, but I was the youngest, and we got along. Now my brother was next to me. Him and I had our brother and sister spouts, because we were the 2 at home at the end. But when it came down to the nitty-gritty, we were brother and sister.
All right. Well, you had a 20-year gap between your oldest sibling and you. Do you think that as time went on, did that not matter to you as your relationship, or was it like a mother-daughter kind of more of a relationship, more than a sister-sister kind of thing?
I knew all along she was my sister, and she treated me like a sister, and I looked to her as a sister, even though they, I think, babied me a little bit, yes, but I enjoyed it.
All right. And then, so after your siblings were grown, where did they move to?
They started to move away. Some went to Iowa, and then they went out to California, to Washington, And then they moved out west. That's about, yeah. Only one or two stayed there which you might say at home.
Okay. And then, so did you have a favorite brother or sister?
Well, I had one sister that I guess you could probably call a favorite because she stayed at home. She lived at home on a farm, and I lived with her all summer, every summer for 6-7 years. And then after we got grown, we were still very close.
And what was her name?
Florence.
Okay, what, where in the lineup is
she? Would have been 1, 2, 3, the fourth child.
Okay. And then, did you have like a favorite close brother or?
Yes, well, the one that was at home, Stan. Him and I were close, even though we wouldn't act like it. At that stage of the game, when we were that age, you weren't supposed to associate with your brother and sister.
All right. And how many of your siblings got married?
All of them.
And like, when was there a specific time they got married, or?
Well, like I said, one sister and one brother was married before I was born. And then after that, they started to get married after the war.
All right.
Or before the war and after the war.
All right. So, you obviously had nieces and nephews even before you were born. So, like, just tell me about them.
They were the two nephews. We were real good friends. Real good friends. There were 3 nephews, and we were all about the same age, and we've all lived there. And we were very good friends. We went playing together, went to the movies together, and enjoyed each other. But if we did go out somewhere, we were never aunt and nephew. We were cousins.
So you guys were like they didn't consider you to be like a maternal figure.
Exactly. They did not want to be known Auntie Nadine's taking them. And I would do it just to be kind of say, come on, Auntie will show you. That didn't go for good.
All right, and as a family, did you guys have any family friends growing up?
Oh, yes. Neighbors. We had 2 or 3 families that we grew up with. Some of their children were the same age as my brothers and sisters, and my parents were very good, close friends to about 4 or 5 couples there at home.
Now, you were raised during World War II. How many of your brothers were enlisted into the Army?
5.
All right. And do you remember what branches they were?
Let's see. The oldest one was in the Seabees, then the Navy, the Air Force, and 2 in the regular Army.
All right. And do you remember if they ever went overseas, or did they stay here?
They were all overseas at one time. One of them was stationed in Greenland. And one brother, he had joined the reserves before the war started. So his company was called out days after the war was declared, and so he was gone. And he was in the biggest part of the fighting. And we found a little picture my mother did in a magazine during the war, and showing soldiers and army people, and she just knew that this was our brother Jace. We knew it, and so she sent the picture to him and said, your picture looks good. Well, when he came home, he said that it wasn't him, but there was a sign there saying Guadalcanal. So that was his way of telling us he was there, but that wasn't him, because you couldn't tell where anybody was. It was all, kind of. See. But the youngest brother was in the occupational part, so the war was just about over with when he went in. So he went over to Japan during the occupation.
So all your brothers came back from the war?
Yes. And I have a brother-in-law, and he came back. So we were one of the very fortunate people. Excuse me. At that time, they would hang flags on your windows, and you got a star, for every in your family that were there. So we had a flag that had 6 stars because we had a son of my brother-in-law that was in too. And we were so lucky we didn't have any gold stars.
Now, since you're very close with your neighbors, did any of them lose somebody in the war?
There were neighbors, yes, that did. Yes, it's a small town, and there were quite a few. So as I said, we were very, very blessed that we didn't.
All right, and then just going back to your siblings, how many of them did go into college?
Just one.
And what did he like? Where did he end up working?
Well, he had many paths,
Mhm.
but he actually worked with NASA, which made us all very proud.
Now, did he stay in the state to go to college, or?
No, yes, he stayed in the state of North Dakota.
Oh, that's great.
Hmm.
Okay, now let's talk about your daily life and childhood. What was your religion?
Presbyterian.
All right, and did you guys go to church every Sunday?
Oh, yes, and Sunday school. All were baptized, confirmed.
So religion was a very important
Oh, yes.
aspect.
Hmm.
All right, and what kind of role models did you have growing up?
Very good role models.
Mm-hmm.
My brothers and sisters, and then all of my friends. We're all from the same thing. We all more or less went to the same church and everything. So it was a small knit community.
All right, and did you have any like celebrity role models or someone you just like in awe of when you were a child?
I think we all do. I wanted to be a glamorous movie star.
Was there somebody you just wanted to be in their lives?
Well, I thought Lana Turner was absolutely gorgeous.
All right. So let's just talk about your childhood home a little bit. What was it like?
Very, it was normal, but then it wasn't, because you never knew how many were going to be there, who was going to be there, and we always had such a good time. The bigger the table, the more fun we had. And weekends, our big things were picnics, getting together, playing ball. I mean, it was always a big family. And then as my brothers and sisters got married, they brought in their children. So it was a big family time.
So family was always important. as a
Very,
child.
very important.
All right. And did you have your own room as a child?
Not for a long time. Took me a long time to get the brothers out and two sisters married off so I could have my own room.
And that was an important thing to have.
Yeah, and then they came home again.
Because that was a very disappointing day.
Yes.
All right. So let's just describe like the features of the house. Like, what was the furniture like?
The furniture was very over plush. Nothing real fancy, very durable. My father had him great big old-fashioned red leather rocking chair that everybody loved to rock in, but that was my father's. And just nothing real fancy, durable, but everything was shiny and dusted every week. Floors scrubbed and waxed every week. My mother was a German, and she believed in a clean, clean house.
So they took pride in their home.
Oh, yes, and her cooking.
Now, did you always have that one house, or did you guys move around a lot?
I only lived in one house.
Okay.
The rest of the family had moved around quite a bit, but I only lived in one.
All right. And then as a child, during the war, how many people lived in that house?
Actually, there were only 4 of us. My mother, my father, my brother, well, I say younger, but him and I are the 2 young ones. It was just the 4 of us.
Okay. And like, how did that dynamic change when everybody came back?
It was adjustment, but it was so much fun and so happy to see them come back that if I would go somewhere and there'd be more, and I'd tell my friends, well, I don't know which bed I'm sleeping in tonight, but I'm sure there'll be a note left out for me where to go.
All right. So when it was just the 4 of you, what kind of chores, like, who did what around the house?
At noontime, I had to do it. Well, my brother helped me. We did the breakfast dishes. After we fixed our lunch, we did the breakfast dishes. His job was to we warmed the house by coal. So it was his job every evening to empty the ashes and bring in the coal. And I used to feel sorry for him because it was always, Stan, the ashes need emptying. But I didn't have to do that. I had to, I did wipe the dishes at night, help cook supper. And Saturdays, my job was to clean the bedrooms upstairs, which I didn't like.
You sound very sad about that one. All right, now, what did you have your clothes made as a kid?
My mother made most of my clothes. Mm-hmm. She was a beautiful seamstress, and I had some very, very nice clothes.
Now, is there anything that stands out that you were just like in awe of?
Yes, I had a red pleated skirt that I thought was just beautiful. Pleats all around it, and the pleats just all matched and everything. And then she made me a blouse, and then I had a bottom sweater to go with.
Now, do your friends, were they a little jealous of your clothes, or?
No, not necessarily, because it was within the rhyme of what everybody had. We had no more, and we didn't probably have any less either.
All right. And then your mother made a majority of your clothes, but did you go to stores and buy them often, or?
Well, once in a while, yes, there were certain things that we bought, but like I said, if it was a new dress or Easter outfit, Mother always made it.
Now, since there's so many of you, nieces, nephews, siblings, was there a lot of hand-me-downs going around?
Not for me, but they did before, but by the time I came along, they were pretty well handed down.
All right. So, as a kid, who did you play with?
I had one real close neighborhood. Her name was Audrey. We just lived across the street from each other. If I wasn't at her house, she was at mine. And then she moved away, and then there were there was another girl that lived the other end, and we were real close, just in neighborhood kids, girls. And we were either at each other's house.
Now, since Audrey moved away, with the other friends, how long did that friendship last?
The other ones? Through school.
So did you keep in contact with them afterwards, or you just kind of...
No, I've still got one of them I still write to this day.
Oh, that's great. So what sort of things did you do with them?
Well, when we were younger, we played dolls, and school. And then at nights, we would, just a bunch from the neighborhood would get out and play kickball and hide and seek and tag, just any of the games that came to hopscotch, these things that I don't know if kids play anymore or not.
So it sounds like you guys had a very close community.
Yes, very much so. Mm-hmm.
And then, so let's just turn a little bit back to your family. Did they talk about politics much in the house?
Yes, they did. I really didn't pay attention. Sometimes between my dad and uncle, it sounded like it was getting kind of heated, and I would just leave. I mean, nothing. Each had a strong opinion. I didn't pay attention. I just walk out.
So you didn't really have any interest?
Yeah, but yes, my father and uncles talk politics a lot, but I didn't pay attention.
Okay. Well, since you were born in 1934, do you remember if your parents ever talked about their time during the Great Depression?
It was brought up, yes. Mm-hmm. And it must have been pretty hard, very hard. Because that was when Mother went out to work. Otherwise, she was at home. And she went to work then to bring in extra income. And then Daddy sometimes had to leave town to find work.
Okay. Now, it seems like your childhood was dominated around the World War II. Well, what do you remember, distinctly about the war?
I can remember the night Pearl Harbor. I was only 7 years old, but the only thing I can remember is my mother and father sitting close to the radio and listening, and they're talking about these planes bombing. And I could tell by their voices how upset they were. And when Mother took me up to bed that night, I said I was afraid that these bombs were going to hit us. Mm-hmm. And then after that, the war became a normal, not a normal thing, but an everyday conversation piece. But that's the first thing I remember about.
All right. And then another thing about World War II was the rationing. What do you remember from that?
Yeah, now that was very interesting. Sugar, coffee, nylons. There was no such thing as nylons, rayons. My mother one time came home from work real late because one of the stores got in some rayon socks, and she had to stand in line for an hour to get one pair. And if you went to the grocery store, you had to bring your stamps with you. And we were very, very careful at home about sugar and about the coffee. And you couldn't get, now that didn't affect us too much. Gasoline was rationed, but we didn't own a vehicle.
You just mostly walked everywhere you went?
Yeah, we walked everywhere we went. So that part didn't really affect us immediately, but the rest of it did. And shoes, you couldn't get but so many pairs of shoes because of the leather and that. So it was a big way of life, yes.
Now, as a community, did you guys feel like just didn't like the rationing, or did you feel pride of
Oh
like
no,
helping?
we joined in on the tin and the rubber and the paper and any kind.
So anything you could do, you
Oh
did.
yes, the whole town was into it.
Great. So I'm just going to move on to community and your community. So what did you consider your childhood home? Was it urban or rural?
No, we were in the city because we were surrounded by a big farming community, and when those kids or children, after the 8th grade, they all came into town to school. So we were in the town.
Mm-hmm.
Now we weren't really classified as a city, but a town.
Now, was this like a big town, or how many people do you think would have been living in that town by?
Oh, an estimation of maybe 4,000, if the most, if that many.
Mm-hmm.
You walked everywhere you went.
Okay.
So it was that small. We had one building that was kindergarten through 12th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Nice big building, but that's one building for the whole school.
Now, do you prefer living in the country, or do you like living close to town and stuff like that?
I can live in the country, but I prefer to be if I'm in town, I prefer to be a smaller town.
Okay.
I never would enjoy too large of a city life.
So how would you describe your neighborhood, your like immediate neighbors?
Oh, they were there. They were our neighbors for years. If a new one moved in, you became acquainted with them very quickly. Everybody looked out for everybody, helped everybody out. And like I said, most of in the small town, we just about knew of everybody. Not immediate, but you knew whose house was whose and who lived there.
Okay. Now, did your parents have any friends?
Yes. They had quite a little group that they got together. Now this was before my time, but they used to get together and have dances at their houses, stuff like that. I never saw that. And then after that, then they would get together, every 2 or 3 weeks and go to each other's house and play cards, and they bring in food. We loved it when they came to the house because all these good treats came. And then we'd have big picnics out in the park together, the families.
Now, as a couple, what did your parents do to entertain themselves when they had free time?
Mostly with their friends, playing cards, and like I said, going on picnics, and with the children. I mean, they didn't really go out like people go out now.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier years, I think they had dances and that, but that was before I came along.
All right, so in your neighborhood, would you consider your family better off, worse off, or about all the same?
About the same.
Mm-hmm.
There might have been some that were more, but I didn't notice a difference. And there were some probably didn't have maybe as much as we did, but it was never a factor of, they've got something, we got to have it. It just wasn't it.
Now, were there just like obviously more well-off people in that area?
Oh yes.
And what do you remember distinctly from that?
Well, you would see their homes,
Mm-hmm.
and there were some very, very nice homes, and definitely they were nicer than ours. And most of them drove cars, which we did not have a car, and so that kind of put them up. But it was nothing that I would ever be envious of,
Yeah. You were content with.
Yeah. Oh, with what we had, yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, now we're gonna go on to your education.
Okay.
So when did you start school?
I went to kindergarten. That was, it wasn't at that time mandatory. But in our school, we had a class for teacher training. And these teachers trained to go out in the country to teach. And so they ran the kindergarten every year. So I went to kindergarten for, I think, maybe 8 weeks. And that was it.
All right. And do you remember, what was the name of the school, do you recall?
Central High School. I went there from kindergarten to 12th grade. And when I go to kindergarten, my 2 older sisters would have to take us up on the 3rd floor. Now the 3rd floor is where the seniors were and where all their friends were. And they'd have to walk me up there, which didn't please my sisters because they had friends they wanted to meet.
And then when did you leave Central High?
When I graduated,
And how old were you then?
18.
18.
Mm-hmm.
And did you like school?
Yes,
You
I
know?
did. I liked it. I did. I liked school. I liked being there. I liked this. I'm not saying I was a student, but I enjoyed school. And I especially liked history.
Why did you like history?
It just fascinated me. And I still like history. Geography, okay, but history was my favorite. Math, I could do it, but I didn't like it.
Now, was there a subject every year you're just like, oh man, not again?
Yeah.
Which one was that one?
Math.
Math.
Mm-hmm. Math.
But you made it through.
I made it. I took all that I had to.
Now, when you got done with school, was there any part of you that would like to stay a little longer?
I had thought about it, but during that summer, I was lucky enough to get got a job, a very nice job for there, and they offered it to me full time, and I said no, I'll just go work.
Right. And did your parents encourage your education?
If I wanted it, I could have certainly went, but like I said, I really didn't want it. I liked what I was doing.
So they just wanted you to be happy with what
Mhm.
you were doing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Not too many went on to school. I had one brother that graduated from college.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then can you what do you remember from your teachers?
Oh, oh, you always have your favorite. My first year teacher was wonderful, and I had her for my second year. Third year teacher was very strict, but we learned a lot, and she was very interesting. Then my fourth and fifth grade teacher was the same teacher. She taught both classes, and she was a nice lady. She was older, but she was very, very nice, and it was good. My sixth grade teacher taught all of my siblings, and she was really fantastic. I mean, she did things that we didn't do, different art things.
I mean, do you remember any specific projects or something like that?
We used to make, the girls could make paper dolls and color them and cut them out, and she let us stay after school if we wanted to. And for spelling class, instead of just spelling the words, in the classroom, she'd make up a baseball team. And you'd go to first base, second base, third base, and home if you got all your words right. And it made fun.
All right. And then what do you remember about your least favorite teacher?
It was pretty strict. And there was no, everything came right out of the book, nothing spontaneous. So it was kind of a boring class, I hate to say, but I'm sure we learned, but it wasn't a fun class.
All right. So out of all your teachers, was there certain things they emphasized overall?
This sixth grade teacher I spoke of, and she had a sister, and the sister taught senior history, and that both of those teachers were outstanding, and I enjoyed them both so much. And they were lucky enough to teach all 13 of us. Which I don't know is good or bad. Or 12 of us.
Oh. All right. So did you get into trouble a lot in school?
Little things, nothing major. Talking too much.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big thing on me. I just talked too much.
Okay. Do you remember what was your punishment, or is it just like a warning?
I had to go sit in the back of the room. And then finally she moved me up front where I couldn't. I was right next to her, so I couldn't talk anymore.
So was that did that deter you from talking in class, or did
Yes, it did. It did.
All right. So in high school, well, who were your friends? Were they your childhood friends, or did you
Childhood friends. And then, well, then after, when we went into freshman year, the 9th grade, that's when the farm kids, we called them, came into town. And then I found quite a few. They were new friends then, but I still had my old friends too. We all mixed together.
That's great. And then what kind of school-related activities did you do?
I was in a couple of the clubs, and we were the whole town in school was very athletic minded. We supported our football and basketball teams wherever they went.
Now, was there a sport that you liked to do, or was you just like?
No, I wasn't too sports minded.
You were just a spectator.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that you did for school, or?
Well, I belonged to a couple clubs, and I was in the band.
What instrument did you play?
I played the trombone.
Do you miss playing that, or is that just like a school thing?
It was a school thing. I do remember one time I was terribly embarrassed. We were in a big parade, and you know how the slide goes out. I dropped it as we were marching down the street. So the girl behind me picked it up real quick and slipped it to me. Now, how many people saw it, I don't know, but I thought the whole world saw it.
So did you play after that? Or?
Yes, I did, but I hung on to it.
All right. So when you were about to leave school, what did you hope to do?
Well, at that time, I had this job, and I was I was going to the job and stay there. I liked very much, and that's what I did.
So what exactly was this job?
I was a secretary to the home extension agent, and she was in charge of like the homemakers clubs and 4-H, boys and girls. And we did a lot of things in the office, the crafts, and I helped her. And then I went with her out in the field to the club meetings and stuff. It was very interesting.
Well, that's great. I think we're just going to take a quick break right now.
Okay.
And we'll be back, and we're going to talk about your employment, and then we're going to go from there.
Okay.
All right, great.